So the first thing that I want to jump into is your story. How did you end up with, I think you're over 300,000 subscribers on YouTube. How did you go from 0 to 1 subscriber? Take me
All
through
right.
that
Well, do you want
starting point.
the short version, the TLDR, or do you want to get into some of the details?
I'd like to I think the journey's where we learn the
Okay.
most. So take me through it.
Yeah, so it actually all started back in high school. I think I was in ninth or 10th grade, and my grandparents were invested in the market, and they were just talking about, hey, like a portion of your paycheck, you always put into it. So they would talk about it. My parents told me a little bit, but by no means were they into like cryptos, futures, options, day trading. It was always like invest for the long term. So I was kind of interested in it. I had a proclivity for math. I enjoyed math puzzles. And to me, early on, that's what it really was. So got a little interested in it. And I remember my first purchase ever was some random penny stock that from like one Yahoo article. I was like, this will redo, I believe, the internet infrastructure of Pakistan. That was my thesis. I was like, dude, this one's going to take off. And of course, it went to zero. It was a shitty penny stock, but I was excited about it. And that was hooked. I mean, I definitely lost money there. And then I got into college. And at this point, like many people just didn't have money. So I was learning a bit more. And at that point, I decided as a major to study computer science. So I was starting to code. And I was wondering, is there a way that I get that people, the Warren Buffett style, like reading in on good companies, understanding growth, but I wanted something a little bit more active. And I remember at that point, I was like, I wonder if I could create models for binary options. For those of you listening to this who don't know what binary options are, it is the Wild West. Like you think zero DT YOLOing is something, like this is completely different. And in fact, that's how I paid for my last college semester. I was just like writing some code, trying to tell me if something was overextended. And it was just complete chaos. So then I get into the workforce. And like many people, when you get first out of college, like you're trying to take it a little bit more seriously, see if you could start your professional career. And I was still a little bit interested. So I was still coding professionally. I was working at a bank at the time. And I was still trying to talk to some of my fellow employees, my colleagues about trading, and they were teaching me a little bit. So it was slow and steady. And then I decided the big corporate life wasn't for me. So I signed for a startup in Manhattan, which is where I am now. And from there, doing more data science. And I had this plan. I was like, okay, I'll get a master's in statistics. So I started that. And the whole plan was to work on Wall Street. And I wanted to be a quant. That was my goal. And I moved to Manhattan in January of 2020. So it was great fun for 3 months. And then it went completely belly up. And if you actually look at the creation of my channel, I believe it is March of 2020, because all of a sudden I was locked inside and I was watching people. And this isn't just to like kiss up here, but I always watch people, Graham Stephan, Andre Jick, and me, Kevin. And I always thought it was so cool. I was like, man, if there's going to be a shot for me to do this, I might as well just start now. So I ordered a little Logitech Brio, a little webcam, and I was like, I'm going to start this. And it was awful. I mean, even to the cohort of people who started with me, almost everyone outperformed me. I don't know if I was the stereotypical like coder who couldn't talk, but if you go to my channel, Reverse Sort, and look at my oldest videos, they are beyond cringeworthy. I promise you, if you are having a bad day, watch one of these videos, because you will be like, at least it's not that bad. So I did that for about 10 months. And I remember I'm saying 10 months because that's how long it took me to hit 10,000 subscribers. And once again, relative to my cohort, I was doing very, very poorly. I was underperforming. I wasn't getting views. My just engagement was like not as positive. I was very, very bad on camera. So I had the kind of friend group who was very much into like, oh, okay, like they love you, but they're going to bully you. Like that was their way of loving. And so they basically kept making fun of how I was speaking. And they're like, dude, it's been months of you doing this. And I was like, well, I have nothing else to do because I'm locked inside like the rest of us. And they're like, just try live streaming. So I remember December 31st of 2020. At the end of that year, I've been doing it now for how many ever months. It was my first live stream. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do this weekly and just get a little bit more comfortable in front of the camera, a little bit more off the riff, no planning, scripting, blah, blah, blah. Let's go with it. So I was doing that every Sunday, and I was doing that for about 4 or 5 times, something like that. And then at the end of the month, that's when GameStop started to go crazy. And I was paying attention to it because I was always a consumer of Wall Street bets. I was always reading it. I loved it since college. So I was kind of like just in on it, following it as a story. I was invested myself. And I remember it was a Wednesday. I believe it was January 26th or 27th, whatever that Wednesday is. I was so excited because it really started to move. I owned it. And I just didn't have enough time to make that video that day, like just balancing my work and my video. I'm like, I don't know, what do I do? So it's like with my girlfriend, and she's like, why don't you just like stream something? I was like, I don't know. It's like midweek. What do I do here? And I remember Apple and Tesla were reporting their earnings. Apple came up first. I was like, you know what? I'll just stream that. And then I was waiting for Elon to get on with Tesla. In the meantime, there was one errant tweet or comment, I suppose, in my chat that said Wall Street subreddit, like Bet's subreddit, taken down. I was like, oh, no way. So I switched my title. Like I was streaming, I switched my title to start talking about it. And I went from my average about like 75 concurrent viewers to 1,000. And I will tell you, I will always be chasing that high for the rest of my life. I was like, I am media. I am social media. I'm content. Like I just felt like I made it. It was crazy. And the next day, Thursday, Friday, you know, I was a little sick. So I started streaming a little bit more, and like my numbers got bigger and bigger. Called my boss that weekend and said, hey, man, I'm going to be sick all week. And he's like, what? And I was like, trust me, I'm going to be sick all week. I streamed all week. My numbers just exploded, carrying tens of thousands, 20,000 people.
Wow.
So that next weekend, I quit my job and I've never looked back. And obviously the craziness of GME, I believe, then led to Doge. Doge led to AMC. AMC led to Shiba. And overall, like there's always just been other through stories of just like chaos. But it was wild. Like for me, it was truly nothing, actually less than nothing. People who started with me were all outperforming me. And then just like snapping a finger, one random decision, all the stars aligned for me by switching the title, just be randomly streaming that night. Just an arbitrary decision in all reality led to this conversation here. And I wouldn't change anything. It's been an absolutely wild ride. And I'm just so excited to see where the next couple of years go with all this hecticness in the markets.
That's insane. So when, so you were working doing software development when you switched the title, like I'm just gonna refer to that as like the turning point.
Yep.
And you said you never looked back from the decision of going, basically we'll call it full-time creator entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
You truly never like thought, were you ever nervous? Like, man, I don't know if I can keep this up, or what, was there any sort of hesitation in there?
Yeah, I mean, definitely always hesitation. I mean, I went from the safety net of being a programmer in Manhattan, like relative to the world, that's very high paying. I had health insurance. So like, yeah, there was a nice safety net there. So to be leaving it, to almost be leaving the honeypot, there were some times like, I mean, at first, I didn't think about it the first 6 months because they were so hectic. I mean, I don't even know if I had time to sleep. But even now, I mean, the overall interest in the markets, the overall interest in squeezing and short squeezing memes is down. So obviously, not only from a financial level, but from a fame level, when things come down, you start to think, be like, okay, what I'm doing. Because like as a human, you always want to be better and better and better. So to see a little bit of a pullback, you're like, well, I don't want that. So there's definitely questions in there. But really what happened was that first 10 months when I was getting nowhere, I was just generically running numbers. I was like, man, if I could get to these subs, if I could get to these views, I know I can at least pay my bills. And I was always like, that was kind of like the goal, like almost the proverbial, like the goal written on the wall, like you're looking at it every day. And just from the craziness of GameStop back in January/February, seemingly overnight, I hit that. And I was like, wait, do I quit now? And my girlfriend was thinking at the time, she's like, wait, you always knew that was the goal. If you're past it, just do it. And fortunately, I haven't really dropped below those levels. So I'm like, hey, at least I can pay my bills at the end of the month. And yeah, of course, doing your own thing, you have really good times. And then there's times that you wish kind of didn't happen. But if anything, I think sometimes that chaos of things not going right, really, that's where you see cool, creative ideas. Like that's where I think we see innovation on this finance level that right here, it's boring. If you turn on mainstream media and they're talking about finance, your eyes gloss over and you're just like, you go to the next channel. But when you're doing it individually and you know you're in competition with other channels or just really keeping people's attention, I think it forces you to do something different. And a lot of the times that fails, but it's that 100th try that you come up with something that's unique and people are like, we love this. So for me, in the moment, it's not fun. It's not like you're sitting there saying, man, I just absolutely love this failure. But retrospectively, looking back at it, you're like, okay, I kind of see how all the points connected. Those first 10 months when I was getting nowhere, absolutely nowhere. I remember, so I started in March. I remember in July. July was my first good video. And what I mean by good was I posted the video at 7 p.m. I think by the time I went to bed, I had 100 views. And then by noon the next day, I was a giddy little schoolgirl because I had 300 views. I was beaming. I was like, 300 views. I did it. So at those moments, like a lot of success and failure, it's so relative. But even then, I was like, well, I'm not making any money. I'm not doing it. I'm just doing it because I'm stuck inside. And it's really a project that I truly enjoy just doing. But at the time, of course, you always want more. And even right now, like I wish I was at millions and millions of subs and viewers and yada, yada, yada. And maybe one day it will happen. But all I know is just like the only option is to be different, always look for kind of like a blue ocean strategy. But in reality, you just have to put something out there that's of value. And one way you could define that is doing something that no one else has done before. So I kind of like when things are bad, it forces that creativity.
Yeah, I actually think that's quite profound. What was 2 questions. One, what was that internal metric that you set that's like, if I can hit this many subs, I can go full-time
Okay.
creator?
I
What was
think
that
for
first
that,
one?
there's some websites out there like Social Blade that like they give you estimations. And at that point, I didn't really know any YouTubers. So I was just going off of that. And folks, if you're watching this, Social Blade's wrong. But at the moment, it was the only source of information I had. So I
Yeah.
remember thinking, oh, okay, I can pay my bills. I think if I had 50,000 views, because I kind of had this assumption, or 50,000 subs. Because I was like, oh, like I'm noticing all of these people, their income is estimated to be roughly double what their sub count is. And once again, folks, this was a completely flawed logic. I'm just telling you what my logic was at that time. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, if it's 50,000 subs, I think I can make 100K before taxes and everything. And it was just some like back of the napkin type of math. And once again, that is all wrong. But I remember that was a metric. I'm like, if I could pass 50,000. And what happened for me was in January, I hit 10,000 before everything exploded. And by the time February came to the end, I was at 150,000. So I was
Holy
like,
cow.
there's almost no reason for me to stop.
And so that was pre-COVID, you hit 100,000, right?
No. That
Oh,
was
of
definitely the
21.
peak of, yeah, this was in 21. So I
Gotcha.
started in
Okay.
March and it took me to the end of the year. That next January, I hit 10. And then everything blew up. And by the end of February, within 6 weeks, I gained like 150,000 subs.
Got it. And when you say Social Blade's wrong, when you said you'd do like roughly double the revenue of sub count, is Social Blade wrong, high or low?
I've actually noticed that a lot of their estimated CPM is lower. This is when I was checking on it back then. It maybe is a
Mhm.
little bit more accurate now. Like I hope they are refining it, but I noticed that for those of you who don't know, it's cost per milli, how much roughly you get paid per 1,000 views, and revenue is your revenue per 1,000 views. So your CPM and your RPM. I've noticed that they've kind of under predicted that. And maybe it's because I'm more so of a streamer and maybe they don't know how to properly bucket streamers. So I'd be
Mhm.
interested to see other people, but in reality, it's kind of I honestly don't even know the last time I went on one of those websites.
Yeah. Do you when your friends kind of, for lack of better terms, like made fun of you for your scripted
Mhm.
videos, did you ever go back to scripted videos?
Yeah, so I did it more as an exercise. Even now, I will try to do it, but I am, for whatever reason, I just cannot pull it off. If you give me a line and you're like, Matt, I need you to say these 3 lines, by the time I repeat it 5 times, like a take and a take and a take, it just sounds so forced and so robotic. And in reality, those are all of my early videos. Every single sentence was a sentence I probably said 10 to 15 times. So, of course, it sounds forced because I just didn't have that acting ability where I am fully aware that they do take over and over and over. And yet I am so impressed that they are able to make it sound natural. So in reality, I just fell into something that I think was just a little bit, I don't know, more geared to my personality or whatever the word would be. When I started streaming, I was just like, oh, this improv thing is where I'm at. Like, give me one shot. I'll just rip through it. I sound a little bit more natural, opposed to like, oh, like, was that word right? Or like the intonation up and down. Like, it just started to get really messy. So I try it now and I'd like to think that it's way better than when I first did it. But still, if you listen to my natural cadence in a stream versus an actual like uploaded video, my streams are still way better. It's just where my skill set's at.
Got it. I think that's super interesting. Again, but it's like content creation is just refinement, right?
Mhm.
Like you just refine every time, and I think that you found your streaming, and that was huge. What was the peak of your creative like high, and what
Mm.
was also the bottom where you're like, this is like hard being a creator. Like I don't know maybe you
Yeah.
were doubting your ability? What was, take me through both of those times.
Yeah, phenomenal question. So there were some special highs to me, as I alluded to, the first time I got 1,000 concurrent viewers because it happened out of nowhere, and I thought it was so cool, and just that a jolt of adrenaline. That July 4th video of my very first year, a couple months into it, when I had 300 views, I was just beaming the next day because I like just double tripled my best video ever. So those were really like special to me. I think a lot of onlookers would like more so care about like my peak. And I remember when things got really, really crazy with my streaming, I was invited to go do a show. I was invited to go do the Tim Pool podcast. So I had to go down to the DC area, and my numbers were getting pretty big. And that day, I remember I'm in a Hilton, so I have spotty Wi-Fi, and I'm trying to stream all day. And randomly that morning, someone from Fox reached out to me, and they're like, "Hey, can you come on the show?" And I was like, "Okay, that's cool." So I'm streaming it that day. My concurrent viewership, I saw the max I've ever seen was 88,000.
Wow.
And then I'm also like, I'm so excited. Like the views are great. I'm like, I'm going on national TV, so make sure to check it out. And then I noticed that the whole time that this is happening, my computer was plugged in, but it wasn't charging. And I realized my charger went bust. So there I am on like 6% battery. And like my viewership is wild. I'm about to go on national TV. Now I'm worried that my computer's about to cut off. And I'm just by myself in a random Hilton. And I go down, I'm like, where can I buy one? They're like, dude, you're in the middle of nowhere. You're not going to get a charger for that. And I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? So that I was freaking out. And then I remember like it went successfully. If you listen to that interview, I sounded horrible. I think the line I kept repeating because I was just nervous was, at the end of the day, like I was asked a question and then I started every single response with, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, at the end of the day. And like, that's just, I guess, nerves of talking and whatnot. And then after
national
that,
television, not easy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And then later that day, I went on a podcast, which is a very large podcast. So like that was cool just because like it was the first time national TV, huge podcast, and like just all the other things that were going on behind the scenes that to me, I like look back and I laugh at it. So that was really, really cool. And it was cool to be like, I mean, fortunately, I was selected by like Netflix to be in a documentary there. I was on Jon Stewart's show, like The Problem with Jon Stewart, and that was about the stock market like episode. And like, that was a crazy one. Just like all these moments that seemingly came out of nowhere. And like my major thing is to make sure that I'm just enjoying them. Like these crazy things happen. I'll tell my family, I'll tell my friends, I'll tell my girlfriend. She's like, wait, you're doing what now? And like, I try to just like in the moment be like, now I'm like, oh, wow, this is a cool thing that most likely I'll never be able to do again. So I try to like really appreciate it. On the flip side of it, for the second part of your question there, the downfall of it, or like maybe some of the negative things. One thing that has happened, there's a lot of folks, if you're an aspiring social media content creator, there's going to be many good things and bad things that happen that you never, ever, ever expect. And on the negative side of it, things that I didn't expect is just the amount of people that like randomly say things about you and then it's a lie. For example, I don't know, in like one of the summers when things were hot and heavy, everything was always better, like week over week, month over month. It just, everything was awesome. And then I remember in one of the Julys, it was my first series, we'll call it Brand Backstep. And it all started from just like a random Reddit post that people said stuff about me that was completely wrong. They had no information. But what's interesting about the internet is it's almost like whoever says something first, the world just believes they're right. We're in this weird situation, which I find really strange in the world of finance, because generally people are like, hang on, show me sources. I need facts. I need numbers. I need all this other proof. But even this certain sub niche is susceptible to the fact that people are like, no, I read it, so it must be true because it's on the internet. It must be true. And so like, I feel like I spent an entire weekend just going back and forth with people. They were like, I heard this. I was like, well, it's wrong. Where's evidence? It doesn't matter. Like blah, blah, blah. And, that was a shocking thing to me. And looking back on it, I shouldn't have spent all weekend. But now as you get into it and you take all these, like, I guess, emotional hits, you just start to look to you start to know you should just be overlooking it and be like, whatever, this is not waste my time. It is a waste of my time. But the first time it happens to you, it's the most important thing in the world. So like, I remember going through that, and I would argue that that was the biggest lull in my career, like mentally. And then it happens more and more, and you're like, oh, this is literally just the internet and nothing matters. A little tip to anyone out there, when you get into social media, one of the biggest things I've learned is like, I can't say it just doesn't matter, but things that seem so incredibly big honestly, if you wait 1 day, a day and a half, 2 days, it just blows over. People just don't care. It's this concept if you don't put oxygen into it, it will die out. I promise you within 2 days. Whatever seems so big in your world imploding, if you wait 2 days, you're going to be like, why did I even think about it for a second? So just a little bit of a tip there for everyone listening.
Yeah, that's perfect. I was actually going to ask like what keeps you going.
Mm.
Is
Sorry.
Yeah, no, kind of to build on that. Is there times when the momentum seems to like because you have those peaks in 21.
Mhm.
Is there times in 22, 23 when it like what keeps you going? What keeps you producing? Is it just like, oh, I got to go work, or is there something more that keeps you motivated?
Yeah. So relative to that peak, I mean, folks, it's not hard to see my numbers are actually nowhere close to it. Like, I hope we could do an interview in the future where I'm actually back and making a new peak. But relative to those crazy, crazy numbers, like I'm kind of always chasing that. Like I've now almost just, I guess, a lot of finance creators, we've plateaued. Everyone is just waiting for the next, like, ideally positive thing to happen. So that's been about a year and a half of my life now of like, why do I keep doing it when the numbers are arguably not as good? And to me, I just love doing my own thing. I know we touched on it a little bit, but I worked at a bank previously and then I downsized because I was like, maybe that's not the environment for me. I need this concept of like more of my exact decisions leading to an effect. Like I didn't want to be lost in the shuffle, if you will. And then even at a startup, I was like, still, man, I don't have that much control of what I want. So for me, I just love doing my own thing. If I want to work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, great, I'll crush it. Everything will get better. And then on the other side, if I want to take my like foot off the gas and just take a little bit of a break, I see that as well. I just like being at least having the feeling of being in control of my own destiny, which I'm not saying it is right or it isn't right in corporate America. It's just where I was personally, I didn't feel like I had that kind of control. If I came into the office and crushed it, it didn't matter. If I came into the office and did nothing, it didn't matter. And to me, especially starting out my career, I found that to be very, very bothersome. I was like, well, hang on, if I'm in my 20s right now and I have the time to like really go for it, well, if I'm putting in all that effort to something, I want to see what the fruits of my labor are. And for me, that's what keeps me going is because I'm like, oh, great. Like I did this. I had a new unique idea. I did a bunch of research on whatever stock XYZ and people really liked it. Or I messed this one up so they didn't like it. And now I need to think of a better way to explain it. I just like, that aspect of like you do A and then right away you could see result B, and just something about my personality. I'm just a big, big fan of it.
I love that. That's actually I resonate with that quite a bit. Like seeing the fruits of your labor, whether they be good or bad, because if they're
Mhm.
bad, you improve. If they're good, then hey, keep going. So
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that. I really like that. So thank you guys so much for watching this episode with Matt Kohrs. I had a ton of fun learning from him. He's a super awesome guy, super kind, super genuine, but he also shares a lot of motivation with me about what I need to do as an entrepreneur and that I just got to keep going. So I hope you guys were able to get a little bit of inspiration from that. If you haven't yet, check out that executive club membership. Also, if you do want to check out Kevin's courses linked on down below, especially that AI course, I highly recommend checking it out to increase productivity. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. Lots to do, but I cannot wait to bring as much value as possible to you guys. Like always, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.